So the Biden administration have basically created what people are calling a ministry of truth. Yes. So this is something under the Department of Homeland Security, which is going to decide what is disinformation. Let me translate what that means. The US government has basically created a board that is going to declare anything they don't like as disinformation. Yeah, that's what's going on. So this is the headline from CBS News. It says Disinformation Governance Board, that's the official title, to tackle spread of misinformation in the United States, focusing on Russia and the US-Mexico border. The Department of Homeland Security is setting up a Disinformation Governance Board to try to counter the spread of false information. The board will focus on disinformation coming from Russia, as well as misleading messages about the US-Mexico border. The immediate focus will be on misinformation from human smugglers who spread false claims about US border policy to migrants to help drum up business. Let me translate this sentence for you. Do you remember when Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, they ran for the White House as the Democratic Party nominees, and they said, oh, Trump's a fascist and Trump's a racist. I mean, he is. He's certainly a racist. But they claim to be better than him, right? They claim to be, they're woke and they support equal rights and they are for diversity and all these nice things that sound great, right? On at face value. And then they get in, and then Kamala Harris is standing there. You've heard this in the crowd dance. And she's like, don't come. Don't come. Don't come to the US. Go away. And then Secretary of State Blinken, during his confirmation hearing, he says the same thing, right? He says people should not come to the United States. And they're talking about, of course, they want to call refugees migrants and migrants economic migrants. They have all sorts of names. If you ask me personally, look, if you are honest and you understand the United States history in Latin America and Central America, it's no wonder people are fleeing. When you destabilize and coup their governments 50 times over and just completely ruin any hope of a stable development as a country, of course you're going to have this situation. In any case, regardless, you have children of themselves migrants. I mean, let's not forget the United States as a country. Everybody, Joe Biden, what does he keep telling us? I don't know. His grandfather or, his forefathers are Irish. Yes. Malarkey. He keeps saying. And Kamala Harris, I think her mother is from India, if I'm not mistaken. Blinken himself, he's part Polish, I think. So the irony here is that you have people they've come to the United States seeking refuge, right? Blinken has said that himself. And then they are denying refuge to others. Very woke, that's very, very sympathetic of them. Such compassion. And so what they're saying here is basically that we don't want anybody criticizing the U.S. border policy. They don't want anybody coming to the U.S. That's what this means. Now, I went off on a bit of a tangent, but I think this is valuable background information. So afterwards, we had Jen Psaki, who is talking about what this board does. And I'll play you a clip of her speaking. She's the White House press secretary. Let's take a look.
I think what's important to note here is what the board is doing, which is continuing what is important disinformation-related work that began under the former administration. The fact sheet that they put out, what they noted yesterday, what they noted in there is that this is meant to, the first bullet was about protecting privacy, civil rights, and civil liberties, and the First Amendment. They said the primary mission is to establish best practices to ensure that efforts to understand and respond to disinformation are done in ways that protect privacy, civil rights, and civil liberties. I'd also note that the first example they gave about what they're going to do is support the Department of Homeland Security's ongoing work back to the former administration to address how and understand how misinformation spread by human smugglers that prey on vulnerable populations attempting to migrate to the United States.
Right. So this is a cover story. Right? This is a cover story. This is just the excuse to get this through the door. The problem with all of this is that during the last years, you've seen specifically from what you would call neoliberals or Democrats, their idea of disinformation is anything they don't like. And we've seen this, for example, with the Hunter Biden laptop story. So, right on the cusp of the US election, Donald Trump versus Joe Biden, there's this story that comes out in the New York Post about Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, and his laptop. Somebody, they got the contents of his laptop, and he's got all this information about his corruption and business dealings in Ukraine and China. It's very bad. It's bad press. And what happened is you had all of these intelligence officials, they signed this letter, this joint letter, saying that this is a fake story, the information is fake, and it's from Russia. It's Russian disinformation. Now keep in mind, Joe Biden himself and his son not once came out and said this is fake. When someone publishes some bullshit about you, right? Usually, especially if you're running for president of the United States, you would be inclined to come out and say, well, that's not true. This is obviously fake. But they didn't. They got the US intelligence community and the mainstream media and the corporations to do it for them. And so Twitter and Facebook, they blocked this link from even being shared. And most importantly, they blocked the New York Post from sharing any posts on their Twitter account, right, and their Facebook account. And when you would share the link, they kept changing the policy from one day to the next. It either wouldn't work at first, and then there was a label. I don't remember the details exactly, but this is what happened, right? They basically tried to censor the story and kill it, even though it's true. And the New York Times corroborated this just a few weeks ago, so we know the story was true. And it's an example of how even when something is 100% factually correct, the establishment, the media, the corporations, and, of course, the intelligence communities will come out and try to kill it by saying, oh, it's Russia, it's Russia, Russia, Russia. Like as if this is the 1950s, it's neo-McCarthyism, really neo-McCarthyism. And, of course, anybody who spreads the story is you're also a Putin puppet and so on. And you just want to help Russia. You're a traitor to the United States, all sorts of things, right? And another story, again, I covered all of these things as they were happening right here. Another story was the bounties, right? They claimed that the Russians were paying people in Afghanistan. They were paying the Taliban to kill US soldiers. Now, we know the story is bullshit. But the first red flag is, why would you have to pay someone whose country has been invaded to kill the occupier? That makes no sense. Usually when somebody invades you and you're occupied for 20 years, I don't think you need money to fight the occupier. Money is the last thing on your mind. You just want to get rid of the occupier, right? But so that's the first telltale sign that this is nonsense. And then you had people in the US military who came out and said this is nonsense. But that didn't stop them from publishing the story, right? It was on Richard Medhurst, it was in the New York Times, and this was front page news. And they used this as sort of like something to annoy Trump with, like, oh, Trump knew about this and he didn't do anything. Yeah, he didn't do anything because it's fake. And I'm the last one to defend Trump. I think he is just as establishment as the rest of them. But it goes to show you how, once again, you had a nonsense story. They're blaming Russia for it. And that is actual disinformation because it's a lie. But they are passing it off as the truth. So we are really living in an upside down world at the moment where the people claiming to fight disinformation are actually the biggest spreaders of disinformation. And then when somebody presents them with the truth, they call that disinformation. It's mind-boggling. It's truly mind-boggling. And of course, I mean, don't even get me started on the Iraq War and all of this, because I remember that the anthrax letters and the WMDs. Don't even get me started, please. I want to show you something here because these are some of the comments that have been coming out. They're really something. They're really something. But first, I feel like I should introduce you to the woman in charge. This is Nina Jankowicz, and she is the woman who will be heading this Disinformation Governance Board. Are you ready? You're not ready. You are not ready.
Laundering is really quite ferocious. It's when a huckster takes some lies and makes them sound precocious by saying them in Congress or a mainstream outlet. So disinformation's origins are slightly less atrocious. It's how you hide a little lie. It's how you hide a little lie. It's how you hide a little lie. When Rudy Giuliani shared bad intel from Ukraine, or when TikTok influencers say COVID can cause pain. They're laundering disinfo and we really should take note and not support their lies with our wallet, voice or vote. Oh, information laundering is really quite ferocious. It's when a huckster takes some lies and makes them sound precocious by saying them in Congress or a mainstream outlet. So disinformation's origin seems slightly less atrocious. Woo.
wish I'm speechless. I wish I was joking. That's her. I'm not kidding. She is the person that will head this disinformation. So she's going to be deciding what is real and what's not real. Wow, we are in for a ride, aren't we? Like, it wasn't bad enough, right? They had to make it even worse. Look, man, no offense to her personally. She can sing well and everything, but I don't. She really doesn't strike me as the right person for this job, especially with the lyrics. You saw the lyrics, right? Wow. She's basically just peddling the same stuff that we've been hearing for the last 4 years. Here, let me give you an example of some of her opinions, right, in the past. So she was posting here that, quote, well, now we can stop calling WikiLeaks, quote unquote, unbiased and start calling them what they've always been, scum. Now, this is really interesting to me because somebody who claims to be fighting disinformation, that's her mandate, right? That's going to be her job. Why would you call WikiLeaks scum when WikiLeaks has 100% credibility on all of their reporting? So I'm not kidding. 100% of all the stories WikiLeaks have published are true. They've never published a fake story or had to do corrections. Actually, don't quote me on the last part. Corrections are normal. But my point is that it's not like the New York Times where you see all of this Russian bounties, weapons of mass destruction. That WikiLeaks have never done something like that. On the contrary, everything, the overwhelming majority of what they've said is true. And she's calling them scum. You know why she's calling them scum? Because this is the mantra in the United States among neoliberals that Julian Assange costed costed Hillary Clinton the election because WikiLeaks published her emails. Which is nonsense. This is absolute nonsense. But, you know, she's part of that crowd. So you can see very clearly that she has an explicit bias against truth-telling. And then, of course, she says down here, you know, that WikiLeaks is a cog in a much larger operation. She's basically spreading, again, this lie that WikiLeaks works with the Russians, which is, again, this is so childish. It's completely unfounded. It's untrue. And this is something that's been taken out of the Cold War from the 1950s during the Red Scare in the United States. Right? So there have been 2 Red Scares, by the way. The one in the 1950s was the second one. Right now, we're living in the third one. And it's global. And so back then, you could destroy someone's career by saying that they're a Russian spy, right? You're a communist sympathizer. And they would do this to politicians in Washington, D.C. They would do this to actresses and actors in Hollywood. You could destroy them and their reputation by saying these things. Oh, you're working secretly with them. You're a sympathizer, you know, all sorts of things. And that's really what this is. It's really a resurrection of that. And I don't know what to say. I'm really shocked. Here's a tweet from Max Abrams, and he's a professor, right? And he said that it's ironic that the Biden administration is setting up a government unit to counter Russian information warfare at the moment, when it's clear to everyone that Russia is the absolute worst at information warfare. And I have to agree with him. Russia sucks at information warfare compared to the mainstream media. But to be fair, nobody can compete. I mean, the propaganda power, the sheer awesome might that the corporate media in the West wields is unparalleled. Nobody can compete. It's not even fair. It's not even a fair fight. You cannot compete with them. And look what he says underneath. He says, imagine if your neighbors put up Russian flags all over the place instead of Ukrainian ones. That's how good Putin is at information warfare. So I'm sure all of you have seen Ukrainian flags in the street and on people's windows, and landmarks have been lit up with the flags of the Ukrainian color. Have you seen any Russian ones? No. And that's one way of seeing that the Russians are not very effective at so-called disinformation, or let's say influencing people. If they were, you wouldn't be seeing only Ukrainian flags, right? It's a very fair analysis. Now, here's a tweet from Glenn Greenwald about the lovely lady that we just saw. Again, I'm talking, of course, about Miss Nina Jankowicz. So Glenn says the resistance cartoon activist whom the Biden administration selected to head its dystopian Homeland Security Disinformation Board, Christ, will provide a valuable service, showing how disinformation is a meaningless term that just means whatever those who wield power want it to mean. So again, this is exactly what we're saying, is that, the dictionary, if you look up disinformation in the dictionary, it's supposed to mean things that are untrue, that are willfully, they are spread on purpose. I'm sorry, but now in, the climate that we're in right now, disinformation just means anything we don't like, right? That's what it means. It means truths that the US government and its allies don't like. That's what it means. Here, another one from Glenn. He says that the Biden administration casually announced today that the Department of Homeland Security, which is a domestic security agency, has created a disinformation board is incredibly dystopian and chilling. The Democrats think this is good and normal tells you all you need to know about them. And I want to make a comment here because, Glenn is absolutely 100% correct. But something I realized when I saw a lot of these comments, all across the board, right? People on the left, and I'm talking about leftists in the US, people that are on the so-called right, meaning Republicans. I hate to use that because Democrats are also on the right, but whatever. They're all criticizing this, but for different reasons. And what I mean by that is look at this tweet over here from some guy who's running for Congress, right? He says that this is communism. What? What does that even mean? It's not communism. It's you. This is America. I don't like that every time the United States or the West or the UK, they do something really bad, they're like, oh, this is socialism. No, it's us doing that. What do you mean communism? That's happening in America right now. It's really hilarious. It's like a 12-year-old speaking, it's just like no knowledge about anything. It's just typical crap they've heard from their parents that is not anchored in reality, like something out of the 1950s. It's so boring. Just yawn, seriously. Another one that I've seen is here. This is something a bit better, right? This person says, being somebody who's actually read a trivial amount of history, I can say confidently that the establishment of a state disinformation board is a substantially stronger signal of inbound authoritarianism than something like the riot last year, right? And this person says, I know everything is polarized these days, but I still have a hard time understanding how we can't all agree that the government creating a disinformation governance board led by a person famous for spreading disinformation, cough, cough, is a batshit awful move. Yep. Well, I agree with that one. I don't know who this person is, but they make a good point. Now, I want to say something to you guys because I feel like people are not realizing something. This disinformation entity is being created under what organization? Under the Department of Homeland Security. Now, again, I don't know if you guys are my age, like you're just old enough to remember the Bush years. George W. Bush created the Department of Homeland Security. And the Department of Homeland Security, it has several organizations under it. ICE is one of them, right? And I just find it so funny that even the Republicans who are complaining against this disinformation thing, they're only complaining against that, but not the Department of Homeland Security, which is also itself, it's the same, it comes from the same place. It's this idea that we want to control everything. We want to violate all sorts of constitutional protections. We want to spy on people. That's what it was. That's what the Bush years created. I mean, the NSA mass surveillance, the war on terror, the CIA torture, that's not new, though. And the Department of Homeland Security, that's a remnant from the Bush administration. Although I feel a bit weird saying remnant because in a way it's very much alive and well today, right? It's not something old. Every administration since then has kept it. Why didn't Barack Obama repeal it if he's so different? Huh? What about Trump? He's anti-establishment, really? And what about Biden? He keeps it too. And the thing is, if Republicans were in power, and they will be eventually again, they're never going to repeal it. They're not going to repeal the Department of Homeland Security. Now, again, let's be very clear. Like this disinformation thing is batshit. Like there's no question about it. And it's really emblematic of the last couple of years with this Russia hysteria. this Red Scare 3.0. But please pay attention to this, because it shows you once again how there's really no difference between Democrats and Republicans. Like, at the end of the day, they're fine with these institutions. They love the banks, they love the corporations, they love spying on people, and they're fine with things like the Department of Homeland Security, right? Which allows for things like this to be created. And just to jog your memory, in case you've forgotten what the Department of Homeland Security is and what it has done in the past, this is just a very simple thing from the ACLU, from their website, about the Department of Homeland Security spying on people, okay? And so once again, they list the components under the DHS that have intelligence missions. So that's the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, the Coast Guard, Customs and Border Protection, ICE. You remember, again, this is one of those things where people criticized Trump for, rightfully so, for all these ICE raids, but nobody criticizes the DHS that created ICE. Weird. So, and of course the TSA, okay, and they all have intelligence activities and mandates. And so, for just as an example, the Customs, Border and Protection, they issued a new policy in July 2008 that lets them search laptops. Okay, so they can search, copy, and retain the contents of travelers' electronic devices, such as laptops, cell phones, Blackberries, and external hard drives, without any suspicion of wrongdoing. Any suspicion. These highly intrusive government searches into a traveler's most private information without any reasonable suspicion are a threat to the most basic privacy rights guaranteed in the Constitution. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not a lawyer, but my understanding was that when you're about to enter the United States, so you're technically at the border, right, where they have jurisdiction, you don't have any constitutional rights because it doesn't apply yet. So that's their legal reasoning of how to get around that, right? Then again, the United States loves doing things like this. That's how they torture people at Guantanamo Bay. They create a legal loophole within a legal loophole within a black hole. And then that's how they can justify denying prisoners their habeas corpus and basic rights and torturing them and so on, right? So again, that doesn't make it okay in any stretch of the imagination. But I'm just reminding you what both Democrats and Republicans are fine with. This is one of those things. And of course, there are many, many, many other examples. Just one thing that pops into mind that I remember, they were spying on American Muslims, again, for no reason. And these are huge scandals that erupted during the Bush years and then, of course, also into the Obama years. And my point here, again, is just how basically both Democrats and Republicans are really fine with these things, right? So yes, the Disinformation Board is Orwellian. There's no question about it. Like, no question. And I'm the first to criticize it. But be careful, because this tweet right here, it has some truth to it, this one. This person says, "Don't be fooled. Republicans oppose the Disinformation Board now. But when they control the White House, they will be its strongest proponents." And I really cannot argue with that. You know why? Because I'm old enough to remember the Bush years. And I'm old enough to remember how anybody who was against the Iraq War, they were accused of lying. They were accused of being a terrorist sympathizer, a Saddam apologist, you name it. It's all of this stuff. And so when it's the same mantra, it's like whatever the state says is the truth. Whatever the CIA says, whatever the White House says is reported as fact, as truth by the media, by the press. I've seen that when Republicans were in control, and we're seeing it now when Democrats are in control. So don't be under any illusion. Don't trick yourself. Okay? Because they really aren't that different. These are people who went to school together. They have lunch together. They graduated from the same college. They were in fraternities together and whatever societies. And, you remember Lindsey Graham. I love this video where he's sitting in a limousine and he's like, "Joe Biden is one of the greatest people I have ever met." That's really who they are at the end of the day. But yeah, this is some really Orwellian stuff, this disinformation crap. And the fact it's headed by her. Again, she can sing quite well, but the lyrics, I think, in her tweets and the fact that she's been given this mandate, we already know what to expect. Just look at the last years. You already know that anything that's the truth, but an uncomfortable truth to the government will be declared disinformation. And then anything that, anything that is clearly disinformation but is convenient to the establishment, they will declare as truth. It's that in itself is really, truly Orwellian and the current state of affairs, really.